So if you thought links to crazy fake news stories on your Facebook page were pretty harmless, well, think again. We've entered an age where more people are believing exactly what they read online, regardless of the source, with dangerous consequences, like in D.C. this week. They're perpetuating the cycle by passing that story along to other friends. You know, and I find this interesting because we've talked about this, especially in light of the election, before the election and afterwards. And it seems to have gained speed. So I want to have just a larger conversation with both of you guys who are in the news business about fake news. And starting off, first off, should we be calling it fake news?
Well, if it's fake, we should. If it's something we don't agree with,
instead of just like an urban legend or a total, total lie, or I mean.
The problem with the internet's a wonderful thing, and it's bringing information to people, more information to people than they've ever had before. But there's no hierarchy of credibility on the internet. You hit Google, and the Free Press, the news might come up, and then some, joesbasement.com might come up same time. And people have, it's no way of knowing or no way of discerning, little way of discerning what's credible and what's not credible. It's all there on the same screen. They treat it all the same. They treat Wikipedia as if it's an encyclopedia that's been vetted and
it's funny that my kids' teachers tell them it is not a source. Like you can start down the path by getting a couple of things, but that is not a source.
I mean, if you think about what's really, or I guess what really seems like it's happening here is that the technology here has far outpaced the sort of maturity of the information culture, and so.
What do you mean? What do you mean by that? Well, the maturity of the information culture.
So people's habits in the way they digest information, the way they seek out information, is still very much in an older mode where there wasn't as much need to question the credibility, because the things that you could get your hands on in mass distribution were all handled by professionals who upheld a certain standard, or for the most part. I mean, you always had tabloids and the National Enquirer, but people knew those things were fake. Now you've got a much bigger media landscape, which, as Nolan points out, is a great thing, but people are still using that old model of looking at things and saying, well, why isn't Joe's Basement just as credible as the New York Times? I mean, there's not that question that enters their mind. The question that does enter their mind, unfortunately, is, does this reinforce what I already think? Does this?
That's what I was going to say. People are seeking out probably information that bolsters what their beliefs already are, and it makes them feel good about what beliefs they have. They say, see, this backs it up. Let me ask you, Nolan, how difficult does fake news, or this era that we've kind of entered into where credibility is being given out freely, I guess, how difficult does it make it to do your job?
Well, I mean,
or for people to take what you do seriously.
You just do what you do.
I think. What we do seriously.
Well, see, I try to take what you guys do seriously.
That line between information and entertainment is so blurred now. You have comedy shows that sort of purport to be news shows, and it's harder and harder. We're not doing our readers and our viewers any favor with all of that. So, I mean, we contributed to it somewhat ourselves, but in the old days, I mean, it took a considerable investment to be a news outlet.
Right.
You either had to buy a station and satellites or a printing press and all of that. I mean, there was a considerable investment. Now it's a computer and a modem and boom, or even a phone and a modem and boom. You're a journalist, you're a news outlet, you're a website.
Do you feel that the credibility of, what would you say, mainstream news outlets people have started to question so much that they're now putting you almost on the same plane as other outlets? I guess you can call them fly-by-night.
Yeah, I think people, there are lots of people who genuinely believe that there is no difference between the newsroom of the New York Times and a political site that is full of people who believe one thing and maybe are not really journalists, but are putting out information that reinforces that point of view. I mean, I think that line is absolutely gone in a lot of people's minds. How does it come back into focus? I'm not sure, but we've always seen this sort of leap of technology, sort of outpacing consumer information habits. I mean, you go back to the printing press and the radio and the television; they all cause these same ripples. It's just that the internet is much bigger.
Well,
I think
and
it's interesting too that people are also they're trying to be the first one to share it as well. I think that has also been interesting to watch how people they see a headline
Their
and they
control
don't even
of it,
go
yeah.
into maybe the whole story and they go, well, I'm going to share this or I'm going to pass this along
most
to
of the
Aunt
things people
Linda.
share on Twitter, they don't actually read themselves. But
Well, there's danger in that.
We've got to be mindful of maintaining our own standards and our own credibility. I think a lot of the media hurt itself in this last election. You saw the examples of mainstream media outlets appearing to collaborate with the campaigns and the candidates. We've got to be very watchful of our own, to keep our own biases out of the news. It's more important than ever. We can't chase those sites that Steve mentioned. We can't do that, or we forfeit all that we've built.
You think about the image that on election night that I will never get out of my mind of watching CNN, which has now this two-sided panel.
It's like 12 people
12
lined
people
up.
up there, but they have people who've worked in the campaigns, people who've worked for the parties, and other operatives sitting next to people who do research, like data research for them. And they're all speaking in turn without any sort of filter as to, well, this person's
context.
Yeah, right. This person's pushing an agenda, and that's their job. But this person is a journalist who's doing research. I mean, you're right that we, as the media, are helping to blur that line. And I feel like cable news is doing a worse job of it. I mean, you don't see that in newspapers because the medium doesn't really lend itself.
No, but
to it.
you started to see some of that in this campaign, where even in print sites, even in our side of the business, people were crossing
lines they shouldn't.
and they shouldn't do it. But you also have, Christy, this whole idea of the aggregators, the people like Google and Yahoo influencing the news with how
When you search something and what comes
they
up,
have
yeah.
tremendous power to influence public opinion in a way that I think we should be worried about. And politicians starting their own websites and purporting them to be news sites. It's a very dangerous
I think it's
world.
interesting, and just to kind of wrap it up and pick up on something that you said too, there's also something different, I believe, with cable news and television news in terms of in print, and with TV, there's so much more time to fill, and that's why it's easy sometimes to start, you see those blurring of the lines a little bit between reporting, data, and analyst, and it starts to blur a little bit. We're going to talk about this. We're going to do a whole show in the next couple of weeks talking about the state of journalism, reporting, and kind of where we all stand and what we need to do to serve the public maybe a little bit better in the next coming months.